you feeling?
Oh, I'm surviving. Hey, buddy.
Hey, good one, Ruiz.
I will get it done. I'm sorry. I didn't get it done.
It's alright.
Yeah, I wasn't feeling good last night. I just went to bed.
That's alright.
I went to bed early, like 6 o'clock.
Oh, really? Do you have a cold or something, or is it just...
Yeah, I don't know. My kids have had like a cold or flu or something.
Could be
So.
flu or something?
Yeah, I think that's going around.
You sound like I did earlier in the week.
Yeah, my voice had.
Got it too?
It's, you know, I just walk I haven't, like, when I'm breathing like that, it just gets head cold, and then I get a fever. Like last night I had a real bad fever. Yeah.
And fatigue.
Yeah.
That's a big one.
Good morning. How are you?
My fever broke last night, maybe several times, and I woke up and I was soaked. Like, just soaked. Yeah, and I was like, I hate it. But I was like, I take another shot.
They were in China Hall last time I checked. Ruiz on the way back.
Oh. Alright.
Yeah, they were in China Hall. They're having trouble on the way back.
So Anna, did you ever get sick? With everybody in your family?
I haven't yet.
Oh, well that's good. That's good.
My throat, bothered me a couple times.
You're good. Did everybody get one of these?
We are not. We're
Okay.
supposed to hand them out.
I guess so. I just saw them. I didn't know, but I'm assuming I am.
Just put them up there.
Yeah, she just walked in
Who
before you.
did? Susan did?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see her.
Thank
Oh,
you.
what do you
I
think?
guess thank you.
Y'all just pass those around. So, and it's good since Pastor has this out. There will be a couple things that I was going to announce for this, and we'll do that here in a second. But Brother Yappy is going to lead the singing today. So,
Oh, Yappy.
nice, I appreciate that. Let me grab my stuff, and then we'll be ready, Yappy. Let me. I did want to stop and get donuts for you guys. Is Destiny here today? Have you known the singer yet? Oh. I'm gonna tease her. She doesn't come today. I'm gonna say, oh, so you come to my class one time and you party for stage training. This is terrible. But I'm sure. I know she was having car problems in the week. Oh yes, and I got the new march. Thank you. I got the march number now. So
Tomorrow's Caleb and Nora's anniversary. Today's Aiden's birthday.
today's kid's birthday.
And tomorrow's their anniversary.
Oh, okay. Now I knew I did have their anniversary group down. All right.
And you got my email on Charity's updates
When did you send it to me?
earlier in the week.
Let me check. I got behind on emails, like my personal
Well, I
emails.
can read it off.
Yeah, if you want to do that, that would be good.
Her question.
Okay, yeah, no, if I don't reply to you, then I may not have read it yet. So, okay. Let me grab my Bible. Does everybody have a song book? Everybody got a song book? We'll get started this morning. All right, Brother Yappy, if you're ready. Just please stand. Yes.
He's gonna shut the door.
They're so happy not to have to hear me. They're clapping.
I come from Europe.
Yes. Thank you. Please stand. Hey, verse 6.
Leaning on the everlasting
All right, if you would go ahead and take out the February prayer list. Excuse me. You'll have to just forgive my voice today. It's just been one of those things. All right, so last week we added Miss Destiny Harris to our class. Hopefully she didn't abandon me, but no, I'm sure that there's a reason. So just continue to pray for everybody in our class. Remember to pray for the ongoing things, and continue to pray for Mrs. Finn. And then also for our missions trip upcoming, I'm going to talk about a few announcements, a few of the fundraisers. Pastor already mentioned one of them, and so we're going to do that here. And I'll send out an email. And I meant to do it last night, but last night I just got real sick. I just did not feel good, so I did not send that out last night. But if you would continue to pray for the ongoing needs, those on the cancer list, those on the unspoken list. If you would go ahead and flip it over, we'll go to those on the salvation list. And then, let's see, I don't have any changes to those. The military and police list there. Pray for our missionaries. The Bruners anniversary is coming up on the 26th, and I did write that down. And so if you think about them, which I think for them it could already be the 26th. Yeah, I think it is. It's already like 2 or 3 in the morning over there. And so if you guys, you think of them today, you message them. I did actually, we went shooting yesterday. Yappy, Daniel, myself, I took Freddie, and then a couple guys, a couple of my friends also showed up. And Brother Bruner called me while we were there. And so I was talking to FaceTime, but it was so loud, I had to take off my headphones to hear him. And I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to talk to him because it's not like I get to talk to him all the time. But it was just so loud, and my ears were ringing. So I was like, I got to let you go. And so he was fine. But I did get to talk to him for a little bit. And Yappy and Daniel got to say hello real quick. So continue to pray for them. And then the Petersons are now back on the trail, and they'll be back in May. Is that correct? So they'll be gone for a few months. So pray for them as they're traveling. Keep them safe. And then let's see. Any of you, if you guys want to go, we'll do updates here in just 1 second. And then Emma Nelson, praise the Lord for that. She is recovering from the emergency appendectomy. And so Pastor had mentioned that in church as well this week. So is there any other updates or any other things that are on this prayer list that we need to update? Yes.
So Charity led for Nora's niece. It was earlier in the week. She messaged me. Surgery went well. They removed a racquetball-sized tumor. It was on her heart. She was in ICU recovery for the night because she still had a drainage tube in, and because her heart was involved. It said she'd be in the hospital for the next day or two, so I'm not sure if she's out yet or not because that was earlier in the week. She's doing well, has already been able to sit up and eat, but she is in a lot of pain. So that was about Tuesday that I got that message.
Pray for her. That's there on the new request. And then Anna Goulette, she did get to go home again. So, I feel bad. It's like she's doing good, and then something will happen, and then she'll have to go back to the hospital. But she is home. The last I heard that she is home now. So if you would continue to pray for her. And then Pastor's also doing what he's doing for them. So if you think about that. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Amy, just for not having more of those contractions.
Yes, because she still has 2 months to go, so definitely wanted to go full term. So just pray for her about that. All right. Anybody else?
There's the group that's going to do college days that RJ was talking about.
Yes, and so pray for them. Ann, are you going on that trip? You are, and then your mom, Daniel, Lizzie, Taylor. Huh? Oh, Dan. Oh, okay. I thought he was going. And then Liz and
And
Julia. Yeah.
and Nicole.
Nicole's going to. Okay, good. Yeah, and pray for Nicole. She fell on her head while we were ice skating. She fell pretty hard, but I asked her. I want to make sure she didn't have a concussion, but she seemed to be doing fine. She didn't get nauseous, and she got back out on the ice skating rink and went around a few times. But I felt bad for her. She doesn't come to a lot of activities, and then she gets out there. But I think what happened was she started to feel confident, like, okay, I got it. And then she started to go towards the middle, and I don't know if someone was trying to help her or what, but she fell and then someone else fell on top of her. So, but there were a few boys there, like young boys, but they saw her fall. So they were helping her out and trying to take care of her. I think they played hockey or something because you could tell they could skate really, really good. And so that was nice of them to help her out. But pray for those traveling mercies that are going on the college days trip. All right. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes. Yes. What was your grandma's name? Abby? How do you spell it? API? Okay. All right. Well, we're sorry for your loss, and we'll pray. Do you know when the funeral is going to be? March 15th? Okay, so it's a little couple weeks down the road. All right. Yes, Pastor also mentioned that to pray for you, Ruth, and so we will update that as well. All right. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
My mom is almost over COVID.
Okay. All right. So Mrs. Wheeler to recover from COVID. Yeah, I feel like it definitely went around again. And it's one of those things that I think COVID would just be around like the flu. But some people had never gotten it. I didn't know. Brother Randall, when he got it, that was the first time he had ever gotten it. So he said it was pretty rough for him. Now, your mom's had COVID before. Is that correct? Yeah. And so I feel like my brother, I feel like he's had every strain there is. He's had it like 3 or 4 times. But it is crazy because I saw one of my friends from college yesterday. He was just randomly driving through. So he texted me and said, hey, you want to meet for lunch? And I was like, yeah. I mean, I hadn't seen him in maybe 10 years. I don't know, a long time. And so we were talking, and his dad looks like him. They look exactly Josh Wesley, for those of you. Do you know Josh Wesley, Sarah? You know Maria McNamer? So but he was driving through, and he looks just like his dad, but we were talking, and he told me that his dad passed away during COVID. And this was, 2020, 2021, and if you ever met his dad is like very physically active, worked on the farm, just very strong, tough guy, and you just wouldn't have expected. No prior health conditions, and he had actually passed away. So I was, I talked and I shared with him about my uncle, but I didn't know that his dad passed away. It had been a while since I had talked to him. So, but anyways, but it was good to see him, and so just pray for those that are sick. And I feel like it's kind of I don't think it's COVID. I think maybe the flu or something kind of go through our house. I don't know, but hopefully we're almost out of the woods there. All right. Let's see. Yapi, I think you prayed last week. Brother Clay, would you pray for us this week? All right.
Hi. Father, thank you and blessing the giver, Lord. I pray for all those requests that were mentioned here today, Lord, and just pray for everybody to have a good Sunday, Lord, and pray for Jimmy and Leon and Phyllis. I'm doing very well in Israel, Lord, and just pray that Israel have family loss that passed away, and pray for all that's going well, and pray for everybody to have a good day in church today, in Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Oh, Miss Destiny, you made me so happy that you came. I thought you forsook me. Good to have you. All right, y'all please stand. Brother Yapi's going to come and sing page 483. 483.
We'll be singing one and four.
Oh,
I sometimes I like that little break right there. And when I was leading my own songs, I didn't have a chance to do that, and so I like that. But I need to what do you call it? My nose has been bothering me, and part of it is allergies. It's not just me not feeling well, but it's weird. I just constantly I feel like my nose. I took Zyrtec, and it helps a little bit, but it doesn't help it all the way. Now, does anybody not have a prayer list? I always keep extra prayer lists up here. Does anybody not? Did you get one? You need one? Okay. So, so what we try to do is we just try to keep them and leave some blank spaces so we can write them in. And then in March, Miss Catherine will put out a new one, and every month we get a new one. And so that's what we will continue to do. But usually, if y'all need one, I try to keep the extras up here, and then we can get them throughout the month. And I try to remember in the beginning, too, to pass them out, so I'll try to do that. But please forgive my voice today. It's obviously not 100%, and Lord willing, I will get back to 100% soon. Now, so this is something that Pastor had mentioned, and I think he mentioned it, so I'm sure he'll talk about it today. And so I don't really know all the details other than what Pastor has already mentioned. However, I do know that on next Sunday, Pastor would like us to do a fundraiser for the missions trip. And so we're going to do a fundraiser for the missions trip after church on Sunday night. And so that will be next Sunday night. And I'm thinking we're going to do the spaghetti dinner. I feel like that's always been a favorite. It always turns out really well. And so, but normally what we do for that, just so you guys, some of y'all are new, I'll never forget the time that Brother Peterson saved the day. Do you remember this? I don't even think you were here yet for college. I think you were just visiting, and Daniel was here. But we had and this was my fault. I was telling Sarah the total wrong thing to do. But so this spaghetti recipe is complex. It's a true Italian spaghetti recipe, and it's very good. I enjoy it. But I've become more refined in my culinary skills over time. And one of those things that I've become more refined in is star anise is a it's a flavor, a seasoning, and I had never seen it before. And so when you get it, has anyone ever bought star anise from Walmart? It comes in a hard shell. So it's like a little star-looking thing that has seeds in it, and the pod is hard and crunchy, like a pecan shell hard, just to give you an idea. So I was like, well, that's weird. So I was like, okay, Sarah, well, chop this up. So here's Sarah working hard, chopping up this thing like a pecan shell. And she had done all the work, chopped it all up, and I was about to throw it into the sauce. And remember, this sauce cost me over $100. So it's not a cheap sauce. When we do this, I mean, I want it to be good food. So just the sauce alone, not even counting the meatballs and everything else we buy, just the sauce cost me $100. I almost threw the star anise in there, and Brother Peterson was like, oh, he said, no, I think you're supposed to put it in a cheesecloth and just let it soak in there. I was like, Brother Peterson, you just saved my life, and you just saved this whole thing. And so we just threw away the star, and no one even noticed. But they would have noticed if there were hard, crunchy things in there that you could not eat. So we won't be doing that, okay? And if we do buy it, because it's expensive, like I think that one, this is the other thing I think that one ingredient cost me $15, just to give you an idea of how expensive it is. So if we do it, we will do it correctly, but I probably won't do it because it was great without it, okay? Y'all didn't even know that it wasn't in there if I wouldn't have told you. So we'll probably do that. But a lot of times it's easier because the sauce is complex. Here's how I normally do it. And I understand if everybody can't help out for this. But if you could, I'll send out an email. But on Saturday afternoon, this coming Saturday afternoon, and let me look at this to make sure there's nothing else going on. This coming Saturday afternoon is normally what I do is I try to make the sauce on a Saturday afternoon. So on the 2nd, yeah, there's nothing going on. As far as church related, there's nothing going on. And so, but especially those of you who are going to go on the trip, if y'all could help me on Saturday afternoon, it won't take long. Usually, if we all work together, this is why I like to do it on Saturday, is if we all work together, you know, some people are just going to start slicing the onions and the bell peppers and all this, and then I'll start, you know, browning the meat, and then we'll just make it all. So that way, the sauce is done. And then we cover it and cool it in the refrigerator, and then Sunday, it's ready to go. So then we don't have to do any work on Sunday until after church. You guys will just come and help. And Saturday, on Sunday, usually I get Brother Randall to help me, and or sometimes Daniel will come and help me, and we'll make the noodles. That's not a problem. The noodles are easy. The hard part is the sauce. And so if we can just, it won't take long. Maybe, like I said, we'll do like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'll be done in an hour to an hour and a half, and that's it. And then Sunday, we'll be ready to go. And I'll take care of the rest with, like I said, with, you know, Brother Randall or Daniel. So that'll be next Saturday and Sunday, but I'll send out an email to remind you. But if you could help on Saturday afternoon, that would be great. And like I said, it won't take long. It's not going to take up your whole evening. Literally, I think it'll take an hour, at the most an hour and a half. And then we'll be done with that. So I wanted to mention that. The other fundraiser that Pastor has asked us to do, and I want to tell you that we have done very well at this fundraiser in the past. And Megan and I think it was Abigail had a great idea about putting a little sign on the table, and if I said the wrong names, but put a little sign on the table saying what the funds for the things are going for. That helped us. We had someone just write a check that was big enough for everything we had spent and some. And so that was really nice. So, but on March 9th, which is also a Saturday, it's the county convention, right?
Canadian County Convention,
Which will be here.
yes.
Okay, so,
It's weird. I don't know why it's here.
yeah, that's,
County.
yeah, it seems like an odd place. But either way, it'll be here, March 9th, at the church. And so Pastor has asked us to do concessions. And I told her that we could do it from 8 till basically 1. And we'll do it like we did last time, where I'll come up in the morning with maybe 1 or 2 people who can help me. Setup is the biggest thing. The rest of the time, it's easy. Bring a book, you know, you can read, do whatever. It's not real complicated. But in the morning, it'll be busy because we have to set up a few tables, and then people will probably want coffee. So we need to brew all the coffee in the morning before the doors open. And so I'll probably get here at like 7:30, set everything up, and then after that it's just concessions, and we'll make it simple. Everything $1. It just makes it easier, and I'll buy some half and half and some sugar and all that stuff. And we're not going to prepare meals. It's just basically snacks for them. They'll go out to lunch somewhere else, you know. But if y'all could help on that, that's March 9th. Again, it won't take up your evening. It'll just take up the morning. And I try to do it in shifts. So, you know, I'll take the first shift from 7:30 to, let's say, 9. And then someone could come in from, 9 to 12. And then maybe a few people help us close. They may finish early. If they finish early, then we'll finish before 1. But if we do shifts, and I'll figure out the shifts, and everybody volunteers for that, then we could just have people show up during those times, and that'll make it easy and get it covered. So if you guys would, just be thinking about that. I'll send out an email, and that'll be the activities for the next week. We won't have a normal activity since we just had ice skating this past week. So, okay, spaghetti dinner and March 9th fundraiser. Here's what I was going to say. If somebody has a way that we could make a sign that says, funds, basically we're raising funds to go to Hungary for our missions trip, and then also if it could say raising funds for Russian and Ukrainian tracts and Bibles, because that's what some of our funds are going to go towards, is we're going to purchase all those, I think it's 3,000 tracts each, or 3,000 total. I'll have to get with Brother Prenger, and then we're going to bring over 100 Russian Bibles to give away. And so we're also going to ship those over with us, and that's, it's not super expensive, but it'll probably be $50 to $100 just the shipping, plus buying everything. And so if you guys would, I don't know, if someone, you'll do that. Okay, so Catherine will do that. If we could just get a little sign, I think that'll help us. People will want to give us funds just for those types of things. And so we'll do that. So, okay. All right, if you would, turn to 2 Peter chapter 2. I won't be able to talk as fast today. I apologize. My voice is just not the same, and it gets dry real fast. And so I need something to drink often. But, whoops. All right, and I'll put this on anything. So, okay. So I'm sure Pastor is going to talk more about the March 3rd thing. Like I said, I've only heard what he has mentioned from the pulpit, and so that's what I'm familiar with. But I think he just wants it to be, a fun activity that our church does together, and then we'll have a meal, fellowship of, a time of fellowship Sunday evening, I should say. But I'm glad to see Abigail and Sarah here. I know that they were feeling under the weather. Anybody else got sick this past week besides myself? Rachel has been like the Lone Ranger this time. Oh, stop it. But that's good. I'm glad that she has not gotten sick. But all right, 2 Peter chapter 2 and verses 14, 15, and 16. And as we continue on our study, and I hope you guys are saving these. One of the things I'm trying to encourage you guys to do this time is to save the the Sunday school lessons, because sometimes I do like to refer back to them. And so, like I said, if you just get a little folder, or if you get a little 3-ring binder like I have here, it does, kind of make it easy to do that. But 2 Peter chapter 2, and as we're studying, and what is the primary theme that he is talking about in 2 Peter chapter 2? Everybody should know this. Yes, Rachel. False prophet, false doctrine. He's talked about how he feels about that. How he feels about how he's going to judge them. And the righteous, when he judges the wicked, he can protect the righteous, as we learned with the study of Lot. Even though Lot was probably a backslidden Christian, if you want to call Lot anything, you can call him a backslidden Christian. Yet God called him a just man, a righteous man, meaning he was saved, not meaning he was the best Christian that ever lived. That's definitely not what he's saying. However, God protected him. God gave him fair warning, and Lot was wise enough to realize, hey, you know what? I need to get my family out of here. And when he tried to do that, now what happened to his wife? We know what happened to his wife. She turned to a pillar of salt. But see, here's the difference with Lot's wife. She heard the news. She heard the truth. She heard the warning. And she chose to not heed the warning. And she looked back. That's what they told her. They told her, don't look back. She heard the truth. And she looked back and she suffered. See, that is what I think one of the reasons God hates this is false doctrine pollutes the truth. And he hates that, and he's going to judge that, because then now somebody doesn't have the opportunity. See, it's different. If a soul winner comes up to a person and says, hey, if you died today, are you 100% sure you'd go to heaven? And let's say that person says, no, I don't know. And you start to show them, and then they're like, no, you know what? I'm not a sinner. Or no, you know what? I don't want to believe that. That's fine. That person chose for themselves to reject Christ at that moment. That's on them. But God hates it when people are deceived, people don't know the truth, and they hear damnable heresies, as 2 Peter 2:1 calls them, because they're not hearing the truth. There's a lot of sincere people who are trying to work their way to heaven. But we cannot work our way to heaven, can we? No, we're all sinners. No works of ours can cover our sin debt. See, that's a false doctrine that God hates, those types of things. And so now he's talking about the rest of 2 Peter chapter 2. We talked about Lot. Now he's talking about the characteristics of people who are purveyors of false doctrine. People who know what false doctrine is, and they know it's false doctrine, and many of the reasons why you can point them out is because of their characteristics. So if you would, let's look at. Now, last week we covered an interesting topic where he talks about, let's look at verses 11 and 12 real quick. He says, where angels, which are greater in power and might, bring not railing accusation against them before the Lord, but these as natural brute beasts. He's referring back to those men who are purveyors of false doctrine. That's what he's talking about. Made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. And in verse 13, and shall receive the reward of unrighteousness, as they that count it pleasure to ride in the same day. Now, spots they are, and blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you. He talks about them, how they're talking evil of dignities, and meaning heavenly things or spiritual beings, and he refers to angels being those spiritual beings. And I didn't make it to the end of the lesson last week, but in the end of the lesson last week, Enoch, and we talked about Enoch last week, and what was Enoch's choice? Anybody remember? Enoch chose to do what? Walk with God. He chose to walk with God. And in his choice to walk with God, remember, he was before the flood, was he not? And God, he was translated that he should not see death. So God took him. But one thing that Enoch also did is he lived in the time that we have just talked about with this evil false doctrine that was before the flood. One of the things that Enoch did was he preached against that false doctrine. He told them how evil they were. And we're going to see that in Jude if we have time next week. I don't want to spend the time this week because I feel like it would just take too long. And so, but I want y'all to remember that Enoch preached, and that's probably another reason some people, again, this is speculation, the Bible doesn't tell us clearly, but this is why some people in the last days, when after the rapture, in the last days of tribulation, in those first 3.5 years of tribulation, the two witnesses that I talked about, some people believe that Enoch is going to be one of them, Enoch and Elijah. Some people think Moses because of the correlation between Egypt and the plagues and Revelations are very similar to the plagues of Egypt, right? So some people think that. I have a tendency to think it would be Enoch and Elijah because they did not die on this earth. But again, that's just my opinion. The Bible doesn't clarify who it is. But one thing that's interesting is Enoch preached to them about how wicked they were before the flood. And the Bible mentions that in Jude in the same context of what we're talking about here in 2 Peter chapter 2. And in the last days, the world will become so wicked that they will be pursuing the same type of evil, homosexuality, pursuing strange flesh. And those two witnesses are going to preach again at them again against their false doctrine and pollution. So now, if you would, let's look at verses 14, 15, and 16, and let's read that all together, because everybody should be there by now. All right, here we go. Having eyes full of adultery, and that cannot cease from sin, beguiling unstable souls, in heart they have exercised with covetous practices, cursed children, which have forsaken the right way, and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Besor, who loved the wages of unrighteousness, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumbass, speaking with man's voice, forbade the madness of the prophet. Now, again, as we study this verse by verse, I have to take time and study. Sometimes we do need to look in context. So remember what we're talking about here. He's talking about false doctrine, and he talks about how Lot, even though he saved Lot because Lot was a righteous man, but Sodom and Gomorrah still suffered that destruction because of their pursuing after strange flesh and of homosexuality, and God hated that sin. And he said, here, now he's going to talk about verse 14, these people who are purveyors of false doctrine, they only think of evil continually. That is their whole mission. Notice what it says, having eyes full of adultery and that cannot cease from sin. Notice that next phrase, beguiling unstable souls. They are there to use people. You know what religion becomes? Man's religion? It becomes a tool. And I'll give you a perfect example that's happened in history. Catholicism, when it took over Europe and it came in the Dark Ages, what is one of the ways that the Catholic Church had power over the people? Can somebody tell me? Right? And so because of that, what could they do? Or what would they do if you displeased them? They'd excommunicate you, right? They'd say, oh, well, if you don't do this, you're going to be excommunicated. You know another thing that they also did during the Crusades? One of the ways that they got people to join the Crusades was like, well, look, if you join this crusade, you will have earned your way to heaven. And people were like, oh, that sounds good. I want to make sure, like a pope, a sinful man who needs to be saved, and kings as well. And see, this is why when you look at Roman Catholicism, you have to understand that it wasn't just a religion as we see it today. Now, yes, Catholicism still has power and sway, but it's behind the scenes. Back in those days, Roman Catholicism, they call them the Holy Roman Empire for a reason. It was not just a religious thing. It was a political thing. They had the power to raise armies. They had the power to raise taxes. And they use, you talk about using a strong arm on somebody. Anna, if you don't give me these taxes, I'm going to excommunicate you and send you to hell. Can you imagine? But that's the kind of power that man try to put over other men. That's the type of men that he's talking about here, is they want to deceive them and they want to use people for their own benefit. That's it. They don't care about anything else. They want to enrich themselves, ingratiate their own flesh, and they want to deceive people and not give them the truth and use them for... That's the type of men that are going to rule in the last days. God hates that spirit and attitude. Notice what he said in verse 15, which have forsaken the right way and are gone astray, following the way of Balaam, the son of Besor. Now, you guys know the story of Balaam. He just talks about Balaam in verse 16. What's the doctrine of Balaam? Can anybody tell me? And it tells you right there, it gives you a little hint. What are the prophets of... If any time you see this in Jude, the book of Jude is a parallel chapter, which is why we've often gone back to Jude. Jude talks about the same topics as 2 Peter chapter 2, but it tells you there in verse 15, if you're a prophet like Balaam, what's your main motivation? It tells you right there. Verse 15. Money. That's what he says. This is notice what it says, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. They're not there to show people how to get to heaven. They are there to use people to satisfy their own flesh. They are there to deceive people and control them. You know, I've always wondered about people who like to have control over somebody. Like, why do you feel the need to have... I'm not talking about when you're a leader and you have to be a leader over people, or an employer and an employee. I'm not talking about... Those are natural relationships that people choose to enter into, and you can also choose to leave those. But people who try to literally just manipulate and control people, that's the type of men these people are. They're not going to preach to them the truth, because, you know, when you preach the truth, guess what? You're also preaching at yourself, are you not? It also convicts us. It applies to everybody. God's word doesn't say, well, everybody has to do this except for the pastor. The pastor, he doesn't have... No, that's not what the Bible says. All men, right? We are all subject to God. We are all subject to his word. And purveyors of false doctrine, and notice what he says there, verse 15, who loved the wages of unrighteousness. That is the false prophet. Their ultimate motivation is the love of money. The love of money, the love of themselves, the love of power. God hates all of those attitudes. And then I think it's very interesting that he brings it up in verse 16, but was rebuked for his iniquity. The dumbass speaking with man's voice forbade the madness of the prophet. The madness of the prophet. Notice that word madness. You know why he says that? It wasn't just like a little bit of covetousness, right? It wasn't just oh, well, that person has a nice car and I kind of like it. No. He was consumed. He was consumed by greed. He was consumed by covetousness. And can you imagine? You're so angry and so consumed that this donkey is speaking to you and you're arguing with this donkey, not even realizing that you're arguing with a donkey. That's really what it was. He was so consumed. And you know what happened to the end of Balaam? At the end of Balaam, when the children of Israel had to go into the promised land, the children of Reuben killed Balaam with the edge of the sword because he was with the wicked people and they wiped him out. That was the end of Balaam. But here, these are characteristics of those people who love false doctrine. They think of evil continually. They think of how to use people. Their eyes are full of themselves and fleshly things, but ultimately they are driven by their love of money. They're driven by their love of their own flesh and nothing to do with the truth. And God hates them, and God's going to judge that attitude. So we'll continue on. And I also want to look at Jude when I have a chance, but I don't want to spend that much time today. So let's go to Abraham's choice now. If you would turn to page 1 of the lesson, Genesis chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. So let's see. Let's do review. What was the first decision that we studied? Eve. And her decision was a wrong decision, right? Her decision was, you know what, I'm going to sin. And you see the characteristics of the devil. You see the characteristics of temptation all wrapped up in her poor decision. The lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. All of that is seen. You see the devil, how he's very deceitful. He's not foolish. He's far wiser than you and I. He knows us better than we know ourselves. And think about that. Sometimes parents get this way with children. Sometimes parents, we can see our children, and our children are like, oh, no, mom and dad, I'm not going to do that. But, you know, a lot of times we know their character, right? We've seen a pattern of character, and sometimes it's easy for us to deceive ourselves, thinking, oh, no, I'll be fine. I'll be fine. I can just continue in this direction, and I won't go too far. And sometimes it takes an older, wiser person to correct you and tell you, well, here, Eve didn't have the protection of her husband, and I don't know where Adam was. He wasn't with his wife, and in that moment, the devil took an opportunity to deceive her, and we know all fell from that. Now, that was the decision. The second one that we looked at was Enoch. Enoch chose to walk with God. Now, one thing I point out that I think it's important is every time we see a decision, sometimes I think in America, in our society today, you know what I found is most people don't want to be held accountable for what they say. For example, if someone says, oh, I'm going to be there, I'll be there. And then the day before, they're like, oh, sorry, I won't be there. And that's very common in America today. People don't like to be held accountable to what they say they are going to do. When we study decisions are things that follow with action. How do we know that Enoch actually chose to walk with God? How do we know that? Because he actually walked with him every day, right? That is a choice that he made, and obviously there's evidence in the Bible there that he was so close to God that God translated him and took him straight to heaven without even dying. Here, that is evidence of his actual walk. So when I think of this and we study, don't think of decision as, oh, that's like that, that January when I wrote down that what do you call it? What do you call those? Why can't I think of it? New Year's resolutions, and then you forget about what you wrote down. You never go back to. No, that's not a decision. You didn't make a decision to do that. You know what they say? They say like in January, all of these gyms, they all get a bunch of new members, and then in February, none of those new members show up. It's just like, hey, it was good. That wasn't really a decision, right? That was a fleeting thing. Here, these decisions come with action. That's the thing to notice in all of these that we're going to study. Look at Abraham choosing to leave his homeland, Genesis 12, verses 1 through 8. Now the Lord said unto Abraham, get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. There are going to be times where God is going to ask you to do a hard thing. He's going to ask you to step out by faith. He's going to ask you to be tough a little bit. That's one of the things that I learned from a parenting book that I was reading. And I thought it was a good lesson that I think is missing in a lot of parents today. One of the lessons in that book, one of the lessons says, you need to teach your children to overcome their fears. And I thought about that because I was like, we live in such a way where everybody's like, oh, well, if my kid doesn't want to do that, then he doesn't have to do it. You're crippling that kid. And here's the other thing. Not everybody who's going to be your boss is your parent. My boss is not my parent. Now, he's kind and he's understanding, but his understanding only goes so far. If I stop doing my work, he is going to have zero understanding. Right? You get that? Right? He expects me to do what I say I'm going to do. We had this instance in December. Rachel and I, we went down to see my family, and we went to River Center Mall, and my son Freddie, he's very gung-ho. And how many of you ever been to like, what's that place where we do the bowling main event? And they have the little things where you hook onto the harness and you walk up and you can do all those things, right? Yeah, the rope course, right? Well, and they're always like 1 to 2 stories, maybe some of them are 3 stories. Well, Freddie was like, Dad, I want to do that. Now, my uncle, he was nice. My brother-in-law was nice, and he paid for my little girls. And I said, no, you got to do the little kid one. And once you do the little kid one, maybe next time you can do the big one. Well, he started crying, and so I was like, okay, all right, son. You're going to do the big one. So guess what happened? He gets all fitted. This is not an exaggeration. So I'm sitting out there. I don't want to do it. I didn't pay to do it. I sat out there because I'm just going to relax, trying to take it easy. He literally gets hooked up, goes not even on the stairs and starts crying, like uncontrollably scared crying. And I said, son, you're going to do it. And the people were going to let him out. I said, nope, you are not letting him out. So what do I have to do? I have to pay for myself. I'm going to teach him a lesson. I didn't want to teach him this lesson, but I was going to teach him a lesson. No, he didn't listen to mom and dad. He was sure, oh, I can do it. I can do the big one, right? Okay. Oh, Dad was going to regret this later. But I'm going to teach him a lesson. So we get out there. I mean, he is bawling, like making a scene of this. I said, nope, go up there. So I put a harness. I go up there with him. I mean, he is freaking out. I'm like, nope, you are going to do it. You were so convinced that you were going to do it. And you know what? He did it. Now, he didn't like it, but he did it. And I made him do everything except for the one that I wasn't willing to do. But, you know, it was funny because when you're down on the ground, it doesn't look that high. But when you're up there, you're like, wow, this is way higher than I thought. Like, I was even a little bit freaked out myself, you know? And it's just because, and I'm not, like, super scared of heights, but it's just this, and as an adult, like, when you're a kid and you go see a super high roller coaster, you're like, yes. As an adult, you're like, if I fall out from there, I'm going to die in a million pieces. Like, it's sad, but as an adult, you don't think so carefree as you did as a kid, right? But I made him do it. I made him do the whole second floor. I made him go up to the third floor. And then when after that, I said, do you, and now he still had another 2 hours. I said, are you done? He's like, I'm done. I said, all right. I let him off. I let him get out. But I made him do it. Why? That's a hard lesson. I was even intimidated by some of the stuff because it's just a mental thing. It's like, is this thing going to catch me? And no one likes to feel the feeling of falling, right? When you're like 3 stories up. The one part that I didn't do was it takes you out over this, and there's a drop-off because you're right next to a drop-off of the mall. And if you just in your brain, you're like, I'd fall. I'm going to fall like 4 stories and splat on the ground. And so the other kids, they did it, no problem. I didn't do it, and I didn't make him do it either. But, you know, I made him do the rest of it. He didn't listen to mom and dad. He was going to do it, so I forced him to do it. But he learned. See, overcoming our fears is part of it. Sometimes God's going to ask you to do hard things, and here he asks him to leave your family. Look what he says in verse 3. And I will bless them that bless thee. Oh, let me go to verse 2. And I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So Abraham departed. There's the action. How do we know that Abraham really chose to leave his homeland? Because he actually left his homeland, right? That's what he chose to do. So Abraham departed as the Lord had spoken unto him, and Lot went with him. And Abraham was 70 and 5 years old when he departed out of Haran. I also think that's interesting. 75 years old. It wasn't like he was 18 and it's time to leave the house and it's time to make my own life. No, he already had a life. He was already 75 years old. And it's interesting because notice he had no children. Him and Sarah had no kids and they were 75 years old. And God said, I'm going to make of thee a great nation. See, this is another reason why it's interesting that the Jews are always looking to be loved by the world. Every nation that they go to, they want to be loved by the world. They try to be like the world. And they're always rejected because they're God's chosen people and they're in rebellion against him. But the Jews wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the miracle of God giving Abraham and Sarah a child in their old age. And so that's, to me, also an interesting thing. All right, now let's go to verse 5. And Abram took Sarah's wife and Lot his brother's son and all their substance that they had gathered and sold that they had gotten in Haran. And they went forth to go into the land of Canaan. And into the land of Canaan they came. And Abraham passed through the land into the place of Shechem, and also called Shechem. And I have actually been to that town, unto the plain of Morah. And the Canaanite was then in the land. And the Lord appeared unto Abraham and said, Unto thy seed will I give this land. And there builded he an altar unto the Lord, who appeared unto him. And he removed from thence unto a mountain on the east of Bethel, and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Hai on the east. And there he builded an altar unto the Lord and called the name of the Lord. And notice what God remembered here. See, this is why I think what James says is so important. That we should not only be not hearers only, but we should be doers of the word, right? It's not enough just to sit in church. Okay, I went to church. I heard what you had to say, and then I go live my life. No. Abraham believed God, and then he put into action by actually departing. And that's what God remembered him for. Look at verse 8 of Hebrews chapter 11, 8 through 10. By faith, Abraham, when he was called to go out to a place which he should after receive for inheritance, obeyed, and he went out not knowing whither he went. By faith, he sojourned in the land of promise, as in a strange country, dwelling in tabernacles with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked for a city which hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. He stepped out by faith, saying, okay, God said he's going to make me a great nation, and I have no children, and I'm 75 years old. God said all of my descendants are going to fill this land. The land that I had never been to, that I'm a stranger in this land when I first get there. God said this land, he's going to give all this land to me, and all of my descendants are going to fill this land. And he's 75, and he has no kids. Can you imagine that? I mean, that would be like Brother Heron get in front of the church and say, guys, me and Mrs. Heron, God's going to give us a land, and we're going to have more children, and their descendants are going to live in this land. Like, oh, good luck, Brother Heron. Now, obviously, that's a different time, right? But that's what it would be like. Not Daniel and Megan, who are brand new and, just married. No. He was there, older in his life, and he said, leave everything you know, leave your family, and go out and step out by faith and let God do something great with you. If you want God to do something great with your life, you know where it starts? It starts by faith, by saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to obey. And that's why obedience is such the key. That's why when you become parents, the key to teaching your kids and raising them right, one of the keys is teaching them to obey. Because that's where it all starts. After obedience, then they can have privileges. After obedience, then they can have a break. But before obedience, then nothing else matters. Oh, well, Dad, I didn't do what you told me, but I did all this other stuff. Well, that doesn't matter to me. Obedience is first. That's what God expects, obedience. And from there can be blessing. Now, notice what it says there in the introduction. See, people get comfortable in familiar surroundings. There are times when God asks us to leave our comfort zone and venture out into the unknown. Examples: going to college, a family departing to a new place of service, or a missionary going to the foreign field. Workers must adapt to changing conditions, and older people often to failing health. We can learn much about adapting to changing circumstances from Abram's decision to go to the land of Canaan. Here's why I think it's important about this is an important lesson because, especially for Americans, we live in a day and age where if it's too hot, you can make it cool. If it's too cold, you can make it hot, right? Okay? If you're like, oh, this shirt it's a little bit hot, let me go take this. I could take that flannel shirt off and I can put on this short sleeve wicking material shirt that's a lot better. Like and that's not a bad thing. God has blessed America, and God's blessed our efforts, and we have a very vast economy and a lot of food and a lot of options, and that's good. But sometimes we get to thinking that the Christian life is going to be like the American dream, in that we're always just looking for bigger and better. And sometimes that's not God's will for us. Sometimes God's will is, you need to do what's hard, you need to do what's tough, and you need to obey. And from obedience, then I can bless you. God promised him great things, that he was going to be a blessing to the whole world. Look at the fact that thousands of years later, who are we talking about? Abraham. Abraham is very well known. And if you think about, he's well known to Christians, he's well known to Jews, and he's even well known to Muslims, because Abraham is the father of the Muslims as well. He has been known and will forever be known because of what he chose to do right here, stepping out by faith. Going to college. Now, sometimes ignorance is bliss. And when you go to college, like I remember moving, I was just trying to save money and, get to college. And I didn't think about the fact that I had no money. I was totally broke. I barely had enough money to pay for my first college bill. But, it didn't matter. And guess what? It's still a step of faith, and God provided for me all along the way. And God can do something. Sometimes it's going to be challenges. Did I face challenges in college? Absolutely. Some of the greatest challenges that I ever faced, I faced during college, even though it wasn't all necessarily related to college itself, but that time of my life. But God still got me through those things. God wants you to obey. Look at the page 2. We're going to see this. A couple things here is the call. And we basically study that. And I already talked about that. But that was the major step of faith. That's the first step of faith. That's the hardest part. The very first step. That's the hardest part. Saying, okay, Lord, I'm going to do it. Let's load everybody up and let's move out. And I'm sure that as he was moving out with, and think about who he was moving out with. It wasn't just him and Sarah. No, it was him, Sarah, Lot, all of their servants. Remember at one time it talks about Abraham's trained servants. How many did he have? 318 of them. And they probably all had families. So you're talking about probably over 1,000 people or close to 1,000 people, not counting cattle, moving in this huge caravan. I'm sure as he started walking out that first step, he's like, what am I doing? I'm sure he's thought about that. You know, I've had a few moments where I've done that thinking like, I really hope I know what I'm doing, but God, if you're doing it for the Lord and God actually told you to do it, I'm not talking about foolish things. God's going to provide for you. The call there, we see that. And he's remembered again in Acts chapter 2, in Acts 7, 2 through 4 for this call. And he said, men, brethren, and fathers, hearken, the glory of God appeared unto our father Abraham when he was in Mesopotamia before he dwelt in Haran, and said unto him, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and come into the land which I shall show thee. Then came he, there's obedience, a decision and obedience. There's the action. The action is evidence of the obedience out of the lands of the Chaldeans and dwelt in Haran, and from thence, and when his father was dead, he removed him into his land wherein you now dwell. And so we've talked about the major step of faith that it was. Number 2, look at across the page there, the covenant. God promised him that if he lived for him, did what he said, he was going to make of him a great nation. He was going to bless him. He was going to bless those that bless him and curse him that curse thee. And God still is making good on those promises even unto this day. God promises 7 different things to Abraham in this covenant, just as God promises you. See, our heaven is not till after we die. And so we can't think, okay, well, if I do something good today, Lord, tomorrow you're going to bless me. That's not necessarily what he's saying. He may allow you to go through hardships for a time. He may allow you to go through hardships for a year, a 2 year. It could be a period. He may give you a thorn in the flesh like Paul and said, you know what? My grace is sufficient for thee. You know where oftentimes we as humans learn the greatest lessons? If I asked every one of you, what is a lesson that you learned from your parents? Like, well, I was never going to do that again. It's not because your parents said, well, if you do this, I'll give you $5. A lot of times, at least for me, I remember, is I messed around in church and Brother Nichols got on to me and my dad was like, you're going to have the whooping of your life when you get home. And I'm telling you, I remember that. I mean, that was like over 30-something years ago. I never forgot it, right? Unfortunately, we as humans, sometimes that's how we learn, through great correction. But here, God also gives us a great covenant of things that he's going to promise. Look at all the things. I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee. I will make thy name great. Thou shalt be a blessing. I will bless them that bless thee. Verse F. I will curse them that curseth thee. To stand against Israel brings a curse. And thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's still true today as we are reading the word that God had given to the Jewish people for all of us. That's how they have been a blessing to the entire world. There, look at Romans 4:16 there at the bottom. Therefore it is of faith that it might be by grace to end the promise might be sure to all the seed, not to that only which is of the law, but to that of Abraham, who was the father of us all. And the spiritual fathers we talk about, we're not all Jews. And if you would turn the page to the choice, and I've talked about that already, but Abraham departed. How do we know he chose? You know how you know that someone decides to do right? You know, when there's a young convert that starts coming to church, you know how we know that that young convert is going to make it or not? Is, well, do they decide to come to church? It's one thing, you know, I've led people to the Lord and I have them come one Sunday. But you know, then I have to go back and say, hey, or what about next Sunday, right? And a lot of times what happens, they'll come once in a while, but after a month or two, you never see them again. When you see a young convert and they start coming Sunday, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, they're coming every Sunday. And then they're starting to start coming Sunday nights. And then they're coming 3 services a week. You're like, man, I think that person's they've changed. How do we know they've changed? Because they've actually committed to serving God, and we see the evidence of that by them starting to go. That's a hard change. Think about if you got saved at 30 years old and you had never gone to church your whole life. It's a hard thing to all of a sudden say, now Sunday is dedicated to God. That's a hard thing. You know how many families get together on Sundays? You know, Sunday's the day where they go to the pool. Sunday's the day where they drive back from the lake. Sunday's the day where we go out. They do, and I'm not against all those things. I like to do those things, but we just have to do them on Saturday, and we don't do them because Sundays, that's hard to get people to change how they've lived. You see, he did that. He chose. His obedience was immediate. His obedience was exact. Obedience is the key. His obedience was unquestioning, and his obedience was willing. There's several others there. It says his obedience was continuous, and his obedience was far-seeing. And some of these I've already talked about. But number 4, look at the consequences, and this is where we'll end. And this is how I try to look at every decision. When you guys make a decision, you know what you should do in your life is if I made a good decision, I should look back and say, okay, it's been 2 months since I made that decision. How did things turn out? Am I doing better than I was? Am I doing more for the Lord or less for the Lord? You know, you look at your decisions and judge how you did. There have been times where, you know what? I made a wrong decision, and eventually a lot of times it doesn't take that long. You immediately begin to realize, oh, that probably wasn't a good decision. Okay, so let's go back and let's change that, and then let's make the right decision. We always have to, it's a good thing in life to look back and say, okay, how did I do? Was I obedient to God? If I was obedient to God, you know what? There should be blessings. There should be God's you know, the one thing that God can bless you with is peace. Have you ever made the wrong decision and you just never had peace about it? Because you're like, the whole time you're like, no, this is dumb. This is dumb. I've definitely had those. But you know what? Also, I know I made the right decision when I do the right thing, and just God gives me a peace about it. Like, okay. Not saying everything's going to go perfect, but I feel I have the peace of God. That's also a benefit or consequence of making the right decision. So let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for today. Lord, thank you for everyone that's here. Lord, I pray you bless the service to follow. In Jesus' name we pray, amen. All right, but save these.